may I invite now Dr. Shyamala Menon, who is the HOD and Senior Consultant Medicine at Medical Trust Hospital, to take over, please.
Hello. Good evening to everyone. Greetings from Medical Trust Hospital. Today we are going to present a very uncomplicated and simple case of jaundice, but with many take-home messages. I'm not going to waste any time. My team consists of Dr. Amal Jose, the DNB trainee in general medicine, who is going to present the case. Dr. Naveen Thomas, he is a dermatologist and a very skilled hair transplant surgeon in Medical Trust Hospital. And Dr. Anil Jose Kokad, who is the gastroenterologist and hepatologist from Medical Trust Hospital. Dr. Amal, please start the presentation. Dr. Amal.
Yes, ma'am. So good evening to all respected faculties and my colleagues present here. Myself, Dr. Amal Jose, DNB General Medicine, Medical Trust Hospital. So today we are, as already ma'am told, we are here with an interesting case of jaundice that presented to our department a few months ago. So straight over to the case. So this is a story of a 29-year-old lady who is a PhD scholar from Kochi. She's working as a lecturer and she is married with 2 children. She presented to her department with complaints of passage of high-colored urine for 5 days and with history of fever, myalgia, and epigastric discomfort for 3 days. For these complaints, she was evaluated outside and was detected to have altered liver function test. And the ultrasound abdomen done outside showed bulky spleen and also features of acalculous cholecystitis. So with these features, she was referred to us for further management. Coming to the past history, she had some history of skin lesions over bilateral lower limbs for the past 8 years, which was diagnosed as lichen planus 2 years back. For the same, she was initially on alternative medicines, both Ayurvedic and homeo medications, and later on she shifted to allopathic treatment which was initially on oral steroids prednisolone, and she stopped it owing to facial puffiness, and following which she was shifted to dapsone. She took it for some 2 weeks and stopped the same medicine 1 week back. And there is also history of intake of arsenicum album 3 doses for COVID-19 prophylaxis 1 week back. On initial examination, the patient was febrile with 100.4 degree Fahrenheit temperature. She had tachycardia with heart rate 110 beats per minute. Respiratory rate was 22 and BP was 120/70 millimeters of mercury. She also had icterus and posterior cervical lymphadenopathy and a maculopapular rash predominantly involving the extremities. And the liver was palpable 2 centimeters below the right costal margin, but there was no right hypochondrial tenderness. And rest of the systemic examination was unremarkable. She was admitted for further management. And at this stage, our provisional diagnosis was acute onset hepatitis with rash and posterior cervical lymphadenopathy. And we thought of the possibilities of acute viral hepatitis A, B, C, E, then dengue fever, leptospirosis, infectious mononucleosis, measles, and toxic hepatitis. So we investigated the patient and the laboratory investigations revealed neutrophilic leukocytosis with eosinophilia. Her absolute eosinophil count was 1,120 cells per millimeter cube. Her liver function showed a mixed pattern with transaminitis and ALP elevation. Her bilirubin on admission was 7.4. And the SGOT, SGPT was 440 and 560, and the ALP was also elevated at 204. Her CPK was within normal limits, and the urine routine was unremarkable. Inflammatory markers were elevated, and procalcitonin was also positive, that is 2.06. Her COVID RT-PCR was negative. Further course, we repeated an ultrasound abdomen after admission, which showed edematous and thickened gallbladder and mild hepatosplenomegaly. There was no ascites or pleural effusion, and the chest X-ray and 2D echo was within normal limits. Blood and urine cultures were sent, and the patient was started on antibiotics, piperacillin, tazobactam, and doxycycline, and also IV fluids, deoxycholic acid, and N-acetylcysteine. A peripheral smear showed a normocytic normochromic blood picture with eosinophilia and neutrophilic leukocytosis. IgM dengue and IgM leptospiral antibody were negative. Also, serology for hepatitis A, B, C, E were non-reactive. IgM, EBV, Vidal, malaria, IgM brucella were also negative. Despite all the initial measures instituted, her condition worsened. Her blood picture showed persisting leukocytosis, elevated inflammatory markers, and procal positive. And the skin lesions also progressed with severe pruritus and facial puffiness. She also had high-grade fever, and she also developed features of systemic inflammatory response syndrome, that is, she had tachycardia, tachypnea, and then she was shifted to ICU for further management. This was the worsening of the skin lesions, as we can see on the right side. The skin lesions also worsened. The liver functions also showed a worsening trend, and the INR was also elevated. However, she was conscious and had no asterixis. So the table shows the worsening pattern of the liver function. Initially, on the day of admission, the total bilirubin was 7.4. It rose to 13.8 in 3 days duration. The AST ALT also was on higher side. The ALT 561 raised to 752. ALP from 204, it climbed up to 284. And the INR was also high. The antibiotics were optimized and it was escalated to meropenem. However, the blood and urine cultures showed no growth. And at this stage, in view of a temporal relationship with dapsone intake for lichen planus, so she was on dapsone for 2 weeks, and for the past 1 week, she has stopped it owing to unavailability of the drug. And also she had no new onset rash, eosinophilia, and systemic symptoms. A possibility of DRUS was considered, that is, drug reaction with eosinophilia and systemic symptoms. And so at stage, a dermatology consultation was given and skin biopsy was taken, and she was initiated on steroids on dexamethasone in divided doses equivalent to 1 mg per kg of prednisolone per day. With the steroids initiation, she showed symptomatic improvement after 6 to 7 days, and the liver functions also showed an improving trend, and skin lesions were improving. Her ANA was also negative. The skin biopsy taken showed moderately dense superficial perivascular infiltrate of lymphocytes, histiocytes, and eosinophils with focal interface vascular change and occasional necrotic keratinocytes. All these features were consistent with maculopapular drug eruption and dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome. So the patient was discharged on oral steroids and was followed up on a weekly basis. And after about 2 weeks, there was near normalization of liver functions and overall improvement in skin lesions. So the final diagnosis comes to be DRUS, that is drug reaction with eosinophilia and systemic symptoms, dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome, and drug-induced liver injury. So a small discussion on dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome. It has been reported as early as 1950, and it is an idiosyncratic reaction. It occurs within 6 to 8 weeks of starting the treatment. It has been described to occur with doses as low as 50 mg per day. It can occur as early as within 48 hours also. It has widespread clinical manifestations, predominantly with cutaneous, hepatic, hematological, and pulmonary manifestations. The hematological abnormalities are predominantly dose-dependent, that is hemolysis and methemoglobinuria. So the clinical presentations of dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome, in about 100% of the patients, pyrexia, that is high-grade fever, is reported, and then transaminitis is seen in about 95% cases. And with decreasing incidence comes lymphadenopathy, jaundice, anemia, hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, pneumonitis, and carditis. So our patient here had pyrexia, transaminitis, lymphadenopathy, all these features excluding anemia, pneumonitis, and carditis. So the dermatological manifestations, in about 85% cases, we can see a maculopapular rash. In about 50% cases, there may be pruritus. And in 15% of the cases, there can be development of exfoliative dermatitis and also mucosal involvement. Erythroderma is seen in about 10% cases. So the following criteria has been proposed to diagnose a case of dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome. First one, the symptoms appear within 8 weeks after commencement of dapsone and disappear after discontinuation of the drug. Number 2, symptoms cannot be ascribed to any other drug given simultaneously with dapsone. Number 3, the symptoms are not attributable to lepra reaction. 4, no other disease liable to cause similar symptoms is diagnosed. And 5, 2 of the following signs or symptoms are present, that is fever, skin eruption, lymphadenopathy, and liver pathology like hepatomegaly, jaundice, and or abnormal LFTs. So in our case, all the criteria were met, all the 5 criteria, and some newer criteria for DRUS like Registrar DRUS score were also met in the current case. So the registrar inclusion criteria, this include 7 criteria, of which if 3 are present, then we can diagnose a drug hypersensitivity syndrome. That is the patient requiring hospitalization. The reaction is suspected to be drug related. There is an acute skin rash. There is a high-grade fever above 38 degrees Celsius, enlarged lymph nodes at 2 sites, involvement of at least one internal organ, and the blood picture showing thrombocytopenia, eosinophilia, or an abnormal lymphocyte count. Finally, the management of Dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome include careful monitoring of the patient, prompt recognition of symptoms at the earliest, cessation of the drug, adequate hydration of the patient, observation for progressive systemic involvement, and initiation of systemic steroids in severe cases. Coming to some medical indications of Dapsone, Dapsone can be used in various medical conditions like Hansen's disease, dermatitis herpetiformis, lichen planus, immune thrombocytopenic purpura, and some off-label indications include pneumocystis jirovecii, toxoplasmosis, and malaria. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amal. So we have come out with a 3D diagnosis: DRESS, Dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome, and DILI. As far as we are concerned, out of all the indications we have shown, I think I have treated patients of leprosy, and I have used it in cases of immune thrombocytopenic purpura. But probably the dermatologists, they have a wide variety of dermatological conditions in which Dapsone has been used. So let us hear from Dr. Naveen Thomas. Dr. Naveen, please.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Shamla and API Kochi for this wonderful opportunity. So coming to your question, ma'am, regarding the indication of Dapsone. I think for us dermatologists, Dapsone is a very important drug. It's not just in leprosy where we use it. There are a lot of other indications, especially a lot of this neutrophilic dermatosis like Sweet syndrome, vasculitis, pyoderma gangrenosum. So it actually inhibits neutrophil aggregation. So for most of the neutrophilic dermatosis, Dapsone give a very good response and is an excellent steroid sparing agent. So it's actually one of the favorite go-to drugs of dermatologists. But having said that, it's like the favorite drug till someone sees a Dapsone syndrome, because Dapsone syndrome can be quite bad at times. So.
What are challenges you faced when you are faced with a condition like DRESS? Have you seen any other drugs also causing this type of syndrome?
DRESS syndrome can be seen with other drugs, especially anti-epileptics are very common. Drugs like allopurinol, antibiotics, any drug can actually cause DRESS-like syndrome, but these are the common ones which are there. So most of the time, the challenge when a patient present with DRESS is if the skin lesions becomes like bullous lesions, and if there's peeling of skin, like in case of TEN. So if the patient has more than 80% of body surface area involvement and the skin peeling is there, then it's a condition we consider equivalent to skin failure, like acute skin failure. So the functions of skin, including the barrier function, is lost, and the chance of patient getting infection is very high. So in such a patient with a sepsis, usually the prognosis is poor.
Okay, you have been following up this patient for some time now, for the past few weeks. How is she now? Are there any sequelae?
She's better with the treatment. We had to give steroids actually for more than 1 month. Usually the recommended duration for steroids for Dapsone is about 30 days. It stays in the body for about 35 days. So we had to give the patient longer because her rash was coming back as soon as we reduce or taper steroids. So one peculiar thing about this case was we had to give it for longer than what was expected. And another very interesting finding is that this patient developed hypothyroidism after 3 months after she recovered from the Dapsone syndrome. So it's actually one of the sequelae of Dapsone syndrome, and it's also reported with some other drugs with DRESS syndrome is hypothyroidism following recovery. So that was a very interesting finding in this patient.
Okay, now let me come to Dr. Anil, who is a gastroenterologist. Of course, we cannot, leave out the gastroenterologist from a case of jaundice. Dr. Anil?
Yes,
Dr. Anil,
madam.
please.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, madam, for inviting me here. Thank you, API, for this opportunity.
I just want to know, the interesting thing about this case was that Amal also said that this case presented as a case of acalculous cholecystitis. How common it is. So can we include it under drug-induced liver injury? What are the usual presentations of drug-induced liver injury and other drugs causing these things? Can you just explain to me? Explain
Oh,
to
yes.
the audience.
Acalculous cholecystitis is actually a rather unusual presentation of DILI. But however, there are some case reports on dapsone causing cholecystitis. But more commonly, we find drugs like ceftriaxone, which increases the biliary sludge formation, or other drugs like opiates and especially sunitinib. These are also implicated in acalculous cholecystitis. As we know, prolonged ventilation or a prolonged ICU care, prolonged total parental nutrition, they all predispose a patient to developing acalculous cholecystitis. It's rather unusual for a dapsone to be presenting with acalculous cholecystitis. Usually we find non-specific transaminitis, and only in moderate to severe cases of DILI, we find either an elevation in INR or elevation in bilirubin. So it depends on the type of liver injury. If it is a hepatocellular type of liver injury, we find transaminitis predominantly. In mixed type, we can find both transaminitis and elevated bilirubin and alkaline phosphatase. Depending on the R factor, that is calculated by a ratio of ALT to ALP. If this ratio is less than 2, then it is said to be a cholestatic pattern. And if it is more than 5, it is a hepatocellular pattern. In between this, it's a mixed pattern. So that's how usually a DILI presents.
Okay. What is the prognosis in these cases?
Usually DILI, it settles once we remove the offending drug and we give hepatoprotective and supportive therapy. Depending on, again, the type of liver injury, hepatocellular, unless it progresses into an acute liver failure, has a little more favorable outcome. But a mixed type or a cholestatic liver injury, like the one we saw here, they might take a longer while to respond. And sometimes they might slowly progress into a chronic liver disease, especially when there are confounding factors like ethanol abuse or metabolic syndrome or concomitant hepatotrophic viral infections. In these cases, maybe around 5% of DILIs may progress into chronic DILI and slowly into chronic liver disease.
Okay, now let me go back to Dr. Naveen. He just mentioned that some of them progress to chronic liver disease. Now, suppose you have a patient of leprosy, or any other, and that patient develops a dapsone sensitivity syndrome. Now, the another drug which is being used is rifampicin, isn't it? So, is there any contraindication for using rifampicin in such cases?
Once the patient's liver functions have recovered, usually the WHO recommendation is to continue the multivascular drug therapy without dapsone for 2 years. So that includes rifampicin once a month and clofazimine daily. Another option which is there, which is in practice in some countries, but is not yet recommended by WHO, is replacement with other drugs like ofloxacin, or we can use clarithromycin, minocycline instead of dapsone. So sometimes we do replace these drugs, especially patients who are worried about clofazimine pigmentation. Sometimes we do replace them with one of these antibiotics which I told earlier.
But never re-challenge with dapsone. Is that the message?
Yeah, never re-challenge with dapsone is the message actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam, if I may, can I add to that?
Okay.
So whenever a patient has encountered DILI to a particular drug, most of the recommendation guidelines they advise you not to re-challenge with the same drug, unless it is really important, like if it is an antiretroviral or a anti-tubercular therapy, which needs re-challenge. Most of the time, it is better to avoid giving the same drug again. If it is required at all, we can re-challenge with suboptimal doses and slowly increase it.
So I totally agree with Dr. Anil. So when it comes to skin reactions also with drug, that's the same protocol we follow. So except for when it is ART or ATT, usually whenever there is a drug allergy, there is always alternate drugs available. So we always advise to change to that. In case of ART, ATT, most of the patients do develop some amount of itching and sometimes even maculopapular rash after the patient is put on these drugs. So in those cases, if it's mild reaction, so if there's only skin involvement, there's no fever, there's no much of other systemic features, we can actually continue the drugs with a topical steroid and antihistamine. Most of the times what we see is the patient recover from that after some time, and ATT and ART can be continued. And however, in severe reactions, in these cases also, it's better to change the medicines.
Is it possible that Dr. Amal mentioned that any drug which is given within 8 weeks, from 48 hours to 8 weeks is the time. But can there be a longer period, incubation period?
Yeah, it can be. So there are reports for up to 6 months when it comes to Dapsone. So the incubation period is very important. Most of the time, we make the mistake of thinking of the drug which is started just the previous day. So that happens in type 1 reaction. So here we don't know exactly what kind of reaction, what happens in Dapsone syndrome, but the postulated theories are it's a mix of type 4 and probably even type 3 and type 1. So your type 4 reaction, as we see with anti-epileptics and other drugs, happens as a late reaction. So usually it will be after at least 4 or 5 days of starting the therapy. Usually the average incubation period, I would say, would be between 2 weeks to 6 weeks. So a drug which is started 2 weeks back is what we should be looking at, more than a drug which is started 1 day back. And sometimes it can be beyond 8 weeks also. So average, most of the drugs do present before 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
One more point.
Okay.
DILI, most of the time we encounter is idiosyncratic reaction. And most of the time, all the drugs that we usually expect a DILI, like statins, valproate and all, we tend to see that the physicians monitor by a periodical SGPT and SGOT only. But as I said earlier, sometimes the liver injury can be purely cholestatic. There might not be significant transaminitis. So in those, it is always recommended that we check the bilirubin and alkaline phosphatase also periodically.
Okay, very, very good message to the physicians. I think we'll conclude the session. I just want, but I think what is uppermost in everybody's mind is the arsenicum album. The patient had taken this drug before this particular event. Can that be responsible? That's a million-dollar question. But then I would like to say that if there are two criminals, one in your own house and in the neighbor's house, let us reform our own child rather than going after the neighbor's son. So the take-home messages I want to convey from this talk, from this presentation is, one is drug reaction is a diagnosis of exclusion. Of course, clinical history, painstaking clinical history is extremely important. Secondly, not only steroids, but all drugs are potentially double-edged swords. So we should be very careful in prescribing drugs. I've seen many youngsters very indiscriminately writing drugs. I think we should be very careful about it. And I think for the interest of the audience, I would say that Medicine Update 2021 has a very nice article on DILI. So with that, can we take 2 or 3 questions from the audience, Dr. Radhakrishnan?
Yeah, please do, ma'am.
It's open for discussion.
Madam, I am Dr. Pai from Chapala. This patient had received some Ayurvedic drugs also. Ayurvedic drugs can produce medical cholestatic jaundice. I am not questioning your diagnosis or anything. This patient has received some Ayurvedic drugs. Ayurvedic drugs can also produce bulky liver and cholestasis. How can you say that it is not due to Ayurvedic drugs?
Very true, sir. He had received and
Ma'am, if I may add a point.
I think it was 2 years back. 2 years back. He had received the medicine.
That
2 years back. Okay,
That
Naveen.
was not mentioned in the when he presented 2 years back. Probably it's my mistake.
If I may add a point, so one thing with which gave a clue that it is dapsone, not initially, but later on was the rash persisting for so long. So dapsone is known to have protein binding and enterohepatic circulation, and that's the reason why the drug stays for so long, for about 35 days. So even initially we had doubts whether it's exactly dapsone or just because the common culprit is there, are we putting the blame on the common culprit? But because when we were reducing steroids, even after 3 weeks, the patient was getting a recurrence. So it shows that it's some drug which is going to stay in the body for long duration, and that makes dapsone a bit more likely. But when it comes to drug rash, I think, like you rightly said, that history, we have to be after it. And a lot of times what we find is when we retake the history, there might be some new drug which comes. So you can go wrong with the drugs, but we just have to, based on the history, what we get, we have to say, okay, most likely it is this drug. That is the only option we have.
Sir, one question to you, sir, skin specialist.
Yes, sir.
How do you start the dapsone? What is the dose you give initially? Then
so dapsone, the recommended dose for most of the indication would be 100 mg per day. And now we have GCSPD quite widely available as against how it was in earlier days. So earlier, sometimes we used to start at a lower dose and then see for any hemolysis. But if we can do a GCSPD levels, and if it is normal, then we can start the patient on the regular dose, of course, with the close monitoring of the your blood counts as well as liver function test.
Was there an estimation of dapsone blood in the blood?
We
didn't do that for this patient.
Actually, I don't think that is relevant because this is an idiosyncratic reaction.
Actually,
very low dose can produce an idiosyncratic reaction.
Dapsone hypersensitivity
is not dose related.
It is not. As against hemolysis and methemoglobinemia, the hypersensitivity syndrome is not dose related actually.
Any other questions? If there are no more, I hope there are no more questions. I think I'll hand over the mic to the committee members of API. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shyamala, for bringing out an exemplary case which has got a high educational value, and all the panelists who gave with expert opinions, which of course are very relevant in day-to-day management. Now let us move on to the last part of today's meet. May I invite now Dr. Sridhar Bino, the Secretary of API, to kindly take over and go ahead with the organizational matters discussion.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for attending this session despite your busy schedules. About association matters, API Cochin, in association with IMA Cochin, had organized a panel discussion on COVID on 26th May 2021, that is last month. It was conducted expertly by the moderator, Dr. Sunny Orathil, and the panelists were Dr. Rajeev Jayadevan, Dr. Abraham Itiachan, Dr. Renoy Henry, and Dr. Rajesh V. Each one of them contributed richly to the discussion, which was very useful for all of us as clinicians in our day-to-day practice in fighting COVID. We got a very positive feedback on the panel discussion. I express my gratitude to each one of the panelists and the moderator on behalf of API Cochin. There were around 180 participants who watched the panel discussion live, and another 208 have viewed them in the YouTube. That brings us to the announcement that API Kochi has launched its own YouTube channel by the name API Kochi Updates. And the panel discussion on COVID was the first event to be released there. We request all of you to subscribe to our channel. Coming to today's meeting, I thank the speaker, Dr. C.S. Madhu, for delivering a brilliant lecture on lung cancer screening and making us aware of the possible role of artificial intelligence in early detection of cancer in the near future. I thank Dr. M.G.K. Pillai, who chaired this session and summed it up beautifully. I thank the entire team from Medical Trust who have presented an excellent mind-boggling case today. Starting from the DNB student, Dr. Amal Jose, who presented the case very eloquently and perfectly, and Dr. Shamala Menon, the moderator, and the expert panelists, Dr. Anil Jose Kokat and Dr. Naveen Thomas. All of them took the discussion up to a much higher level, making it a feast to watch. Thank you, Medical Trust team. And next, I would like to thank Mr. Arun Moses and his team for an uninterrupted transmission of today's events. Also, let me thank AstraZeneca Pharma India Limited, who have very graciously sponsored today's event. Let me also thank my team members, Team API Kochi, Chairperson Dr. A.P. Radhakrishnan, Vice Chairperson Dr. Prasannan, and Treasurer Dr. Sumesh Chako, whose constant involvement has led to the successful culmination of today's events. Last but not the least, let me thank all the API members who have spent their valuable time with us today. We are grateful for your presence and look forward to the next API meeting, which will be held on 30th July 2021 with more interesting cases. Thank you all. Good night and take care. Back to Radhakrishnan sir. Would you like to say something?
Thank you, Shridhar. You nicely summed up every aspect of today's meet. And let us declare close this today's sessions. We'll go forward for the next sessions after 1 month. Thank you. Good night to everybody.